Hi people, it's Archivist here. Today I'm going to be doing a review of the single player of Crackdown 3. And I had a choice between three games that I could really review following this weekend because I got three new ones. It's like a massive gameathon. I played Far Cry New Dawn, Metro Exodus and also Crackdown 3. And I decided I was going to review at least one of them. And the reason I landed on Crackdown 3 was because I felt like it was the one where my opinion, I suppose, contrasted the most with the average opinion. Because this game has been getting pretty much destroyed by a lot of people. And although when I listen to their criticisms, I don't technically disagree, I also think that with this game, a certain mindset needs to be adopted. So the Crackdown series has always been a little bit rough, right? You know, it's if you go back down to the original Crackdown, this was a game that was sold and gave you free access into the Halo 3 beta. And this wasn't actually the reason I got it, but a lot of people did get the original Crackdown for that reason and then found out it was a fun game. I don't think most people would say they found it to be an astounding game or an amazing game, but they did like it because it was unique and because it gave you a lot of freedom. I mean, it came up with the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild concept where you kind of start in the middle and can go anywhere you want so long as you're powerful enough, way before Breath of the Wild came out, you know. So it was a game that I don't think anyone would say is their favourite game of all time, but they may put on maybe their most underrated games of all time. And following this, I think Microsoft realised, okay, Crackdown's got something, even though it was made on presumably quite a low budget. It's got a fan base and people enjoy it. Let's make a second one. And I think with the second one, what they ended up doing was capitalising on two things. They made it so that now it was a 4-player co-op game. And they also put zombies into the game because if I recall around that time zombies were all the rage. I mean they still sort of are, but definitely around 2010 kind of emanating forward and back. There was this real trend going on with zombies. They were in a lot of games, so they just put them in Crackdown. And they didn't really fit even though they sort of should have done. I don't know why exactly, but it didn't quite work. And I think a lot of people didn't necessarily hate Crackdown 2, but they found it to be a little bit unremarkable. I enjoyed it, I played it, and I sort of forgot about it. It was alright. And so when they announced Crackdown 3, and I think it was as far back as 2014 even, well, my initial reaction was I don't really care because I think back in 2014 I had no love for Xbox. I think it took me until Halo 5 came out before I even really gave Xbox a glance. And then, you know, I didn't actually get my own Xbox until the Xbox One X came out in 2017, so I'm very much late to the party on the Xbox One. And it was like something that I was aware was in the background, but I knew there was no way it was going to be fantastic or revolutionary, despite the fact that a lot of people were building up to be. But you can't blame the gamers, the people on this too much either, because there was a lot of talk of the destruction physics in this game, where Microsoft were going to use Azure cloud servers to effectively do all the physics calculations for when a building crumbles, which makes sense because if you want something to crumble realistically, it needs to have a massive interior superstructure. All of the different materials need to be realised, they interact in different ways, and it's something that even the Xbox One X can't realistically process in real time without absolutely destroying the frame rate. And they have retained that for the online portion, but the only way they've managed that is by massively simplifying the geometry. But here in single player, the geometry, at least on the surface, retains its complexities, but the destruction isn't there other than, for example, a destructible canister. And you get a lot of stuff like that. So the destruction is sort of more just cause where lots of stuff can blow up, don't get me wrong. You can still blow up loads of fuel tanks and vehicles, what have you. But in terms of the actual buildings and the environment, no, they do not crumble. And it makes sense when you think about it, because if that was the case, then how would the agility orb system work if they were being placed on top of buildings and you knocked a building down? You wouldn't be able to reach it anymore unless the city was resetting or something to that effect. So when you think about it, it became sort of impossible both from a technical standpoint because the power of the cloud is not quite what a lot of people think it is. There's potential there, but only with a very strong connection. And furthermore, I don't think it would have worked from a gameplay standpoint. And when I look back at some of the trailers from I think 2016, 2015, it looked like the city was completely different. And so my belief is that the development cycle for this game is actually very short. Even though it was announced in 2014, I think this game has been absolutely torn down and completely remade. And I think they made a decision at one point that what they were going for was simply too ambitious. And they didn't want to cancel it because, I don't know, maybe because Xbox One just has very few exclusives. And so they decided just to basically play it safe and think to themselves, okay guys, people like Crackdown 1, let's just remake Crackdown 1 and put it in a different city. And that is what Crackdown 3 is, for better or for worse. And I went in with that sort of expectation. I didn't think it was going to be something epic. I did have a quick look into how the destruction physics was working, and it did turn out that it was only in multiplayer and on very simple looking geometry. But yeah, in the single player, other than the city being different, this is very much Crackdown 1, albeit with some more advanced graphics. So I've been playing this on the Xbox One X. You can play it on the base Xbox One, though I had a quick glance at Digital Foundry. Those guys are fantastic. They do sort of analysis across multiple platforms, and it seemed like it was struggling a bit. But when you think about it, the Xbox One, like the base one, or the Xbox One S, that hardware is from late 2013. It's amazing it's still getting games for it when you think about it. It's such an old piece of tech now. So whenever I see something struggling on it, I don't think, oh, that's a terrible platform. I think, wow, that's kind of impressive it's still going. But I played it on the Xbox One X, where you get 4K most of the time, though, again, I believe it is a dynamic resolution, though I actually really didn't notice it. It did seem to be a really nice, clean-looking game most of the time. And, of course, you can also get it on PC, and because it's a Microsoft game, you can buy it from the store. If you buy it on one system, you can get it on the other. I would have played it on PC, but my PC recently blew up, and I'm basically not repairing it because I was always planning on upgrading the whole system anyway, so I'm going for a period of not having a PC, so I'm relying on my Xbox One X. And although 30 frames per second isn't ideal, as long as it's consistent, I don't have too much of an issue. And I found the frame rates, despite all the destruction that goes on in this game, in terms of the vehicles and just general explosions, not the environment. Despite that, I found the frame rate to be very solid. I wouldn't have any complaints about that. And really, from a technical perspective, this game is what I would simply describe as clean looking. It's not trying to be overly complex. The city is, well, I mean, artistically it's kind of nice because it's super vertical, right? As you're progressing through the game, you can jump higher and higher, and so the further you go through the city, the higher the buildings get. And so it's got this, as a lot of people have already stated, it's got this real sense of verticality to it. In terms of the gameplay, it is basic but kind of fun. Very much, again, as the first Crackdown was. You can jump really high, though it's not really automated at all, so it's sort of like a basic platformer. Melee combat just consists of whacking the enemy, though whacking the enemy is fun, especially when you knock them flying a little bit because you've got really strong. The shooting uses a lock-on system. Now, at first, I found this to make the combat too simple, though you'll find as you progress through the game, they throw such a ridiculous number of enemies at you that I can sort of understand why they chose to, go down that route. And it doesn't break the theme too much because if you are a super-powered agent, I kind of get why you might have that lock-on system. It's almost like RoboCop. I mean, this game sort of is RoboCop in a lot of ways now. I make that comparison. In terms of the story, it's barely there. You just fly in on a ship, you get shot down almost immediately, you get respawned, but you have to build yourself back up. You defeat a series of people in this corporation known as Terra Nova. It seems like the main objective here is that this CEO has set herself on this chemical called Chimera, and this is useful for some reason. It seems to have some interesting properties, and you've sort of got these different divisions. There's like an arms division with the military, there's a science division developing AI, and then there's the industrial division that's harvesting the Chimera, and at the center of the island you've got the main CEO lady person. Forgotten her name. But yeah, you go through and you destroy things on the map. When you've destroyed enough of the same thing on the map, a lieutenant will appear. You defeat the lieutenant, it makes the next fight easier, and it progresses sort of like that. And it's just totally non-linear. You can go anywhere you want so long as you're not being outmatched. So I think you might be able to, now that I think about it, attempt to climb the main tower right from the get-go. It would just be very hard because there are so many enemies being thrown at you. And yeah, that's the thing. You can go straight to the hard content if you wish, though it will be trickier, though not impossible. You can get through it if you want. But I just thought, you know what, I can't be arsed with that. I'm just going to play it conventionally. The game isn't long enough to warrant me wanting to skip so much of it. So I just went through, did the easy stuff first and got organically more powerful and found the game to be pretty straightforward. The final boss was a challenging. Is that a word I'd use to describe it? I had to use my brain a tiny bit more than the other bosses. Most of the bosses I could just fire a rocket launcher at. The homing rocket in this game is incredibly powerful. I really just think it's like an all-purpose thing. There's... How many skills are there actually? I'll just quickly check. You've got 5 main skills. There's agility, and agility pretty much determines how high you jump, how fast you run, and you level it up by collecting agility orbs, which are spread out throughout the world. You've got your arms abilities, which is like, you know, assault rifles, machine guns, small arms, that kind of thing. And you level that up by shooting people when you get their orbs. Great. You've also got your melee power, which you get by punching people. And it's quite comical trying to level this up to max, which I did do because it's like the most satisfying thing to level up, in my opinion. Where you just have to just keep punching people. Even if it makes more sense to shoot them, I just had to keep punching people to level it up. And also I should say that some of these abilities have an actual... an effect on the way your agent looks, so they might get taller or they might get stronger. In fact, when you start to get these really high, they start looking almost monstrously big and a little bit scary. I wouldn't want to run into these agents in a dark alley. You've also got explosive skills where, well, much like arms, you just blow people up rather than shooting them, and that goes up. And that sort of dictates, I think, like how much ammo you've got really for your explosives and a few other things. And then there's driving, which I don't really care for because the driving in this game is not at all remotely fun. I really find it very rare that an open world game that allows driving is satisfying to do so unless it's GTA. It's like Saints Row. Like, I just can't enjoy the driving in them. They always feel so stiff and pointless and clunky. And so I just really avoided driving in this other than a few select scenarios. But if you do invest the time, you get to upgrade your agency vehicle where it has different forms. Like there's one form where it can go into a spider mode and start going up the side of buildings. I think a later one has a tank, though I haven't been bothered myself to get to that. So if you like driving and you somehow enjoy the driving mechanics in this game, then you might like to go for that one. And that, I think, is the most satisfying component to the game, leveling your agent up and getting them more powerful. If that wasn't in here, this game would not be that compelling at all. When it comes down to it, Crackdown games are not there to have amazing depth. They are here to be power fantasies. That's all they are. They're much like games like Prototype, the Prototype series, if you've ever played those games, where it's not about having a compelling story, an interesting narrative, decent graphics. It's just about being in a city, unleashing chaos, just getting stronger and stronger and more powerful. And really, I can't fault the game for doing that. It is something that not a lot of games do. A lot of games will try to be extremely ambitious and would have wrote this in with other things that tied it down. But this game's just like, no, we're going to make you super powerful. You can level up. It's going to be satisfying and no one's going to be able to stop you. It is good. I guess the only thing maybe to improve the game from a power fantasy standpoint that I can think of would be something that doesn't sound obvious at first, but I think it makes a difference, is that the city feels very empty. Like there aren't many people walking around the streets. Like they are bizarrely empty pavements. And what really would have made my character feel stronger is if I am sort of a god walking among, you know, the common folk, so to speak. Like in Spider-Man, which came out last year for PS4, it's kind of cool to be swinging around with extreme agility and then just land somewhere and you're surrounded by all these pedestrians and they're all interacting with you and reacting to your presence there. Here, people only seem to react to your presence if you like bump into them. Otherwise, they're just like zombie people just standing there making vague mouse sounds, and there are barely any of them. So that's something I think genuinely could have been improved upon to get to the game closer to where it wants to be. But in terms of being shallow, yep, it 100% is, and it's also quite a short game. I think I almost completed it in a day, but I just got kind of distracted and didn't do the final boss until not too long before this video actually. But it is very short as well, and I can't really see myself coming back to it if I'm honest. But this is why it's not so bad, because fundamentally, in terms of what it wants to do, it does it well. So it's playing it safe, and in doing that, it accomplishes exactly what you'd expect from a series that plays it safe. It's repeating upon itself, but bringing certain components into the modern era. I've heard some people say the graphics are no better than Crackdown 1, which is total rubbish. It is actually, if you actually do a comparison of how Crackdown 1 looked back in the day on the 360 versus this, there is a night and day difference. But this is what I say about it. It's an incredibly hard game to recommend at full price. It just is. It just doesn't hold that value unless the core concepts of the game really speak to you. Like, you really want to be this agent jumping around the city and hitting people. If you really want that, as I guess I wanted, because I did buy it of my own volition, then you will pay whatever you think's, you know, affordable to that. But if you're someone who's just looking at a bunch of games and they're saying, what should I choose? Is this value for money? Then the reality is there are two things you should do with Crackdown 3. Either wait for a deep discount or get it as a rental. This game is like the absolute epitome of why rentals are good, because it's the kind of thing where you just get it, you play it for a weekend, you probably never touch it again, so you just return it to the store and then you've had a fun time. I don't tend to rent games so much anymore, mostly because my local Blockbuster got turned into a toilet shop. Unfortunately, I really used to love Blockbusters, but it's just gone. But if you do have an ability to rent this game, that is what you do, because it's worth experiencing. It is fun enough to warrant that. It's just not giving you enough content to warrant the full retail price. I think what Microsoft really should have done with this game is sold it at like the kind of price you'd expect for something like the Spyro remaster. So in UK terms, that's something like £30, like £30 to £35. Trying to put it away at the price they're doing right now is just a little bit disingenuous as to what this game actually offers. Maybe they had a fear that if they lowballed the price, people would be put off, but the reality is a lot of the reviews are going to do that anyway. It is currently overpriced, but it is fun. So those have been my thoughts on Crackdown 3. It'd be interesting to hear yours if you have any, and also feel free to ask me any questions about the game that I may have not mentioned in this video. As always, people, thanks very much for watching and see you next time.